Yeah, hey, Swallow. Of course, you know that. But check this out. I have decided to uh, show some of the elders that I know and spoke with and show you some of what they have to say about things. And so, what I'm going to do is put on this elder here as soon as I figure out how to do it. Uh, yeah. So give me a moment and I'll be right back because I want to put on this interview. Right. Kill that one.
Scribe makes step-by-step guides for any process with AI. You know what's terrifying?
That could have been. Men over.
So here we go. This is the video. I met this man.
Weapon in the hands of the oppressor, the minds of the oppressed. As a youth, I always hate injustice. At first farm, I started to fight because I didn't have any intention of taking any scrubbing from anybody, you know. In the 60s, a lot of things were happening from a black liberation point of view. They were impacting.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop for half a second and make sure that people could hear it. I saw Smoke. Smoke, I know Smoke. Smoke, can you hear the video? You can see it? Everything cool? So I'm going to continue then. Thank you.
Impacting us as the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor, the minds of the oppressed. As a youth, I always hate injustice. At first farm, I started to fight because I didn't have any intention of taking any scrubbing from anybody, you know. In the 60s, a lot of things were happening from a black liberation point of view. They were impacting us as youths who were looking for a sense of identity, you know, a sense of pride in ourselves as black youths, because growing up, everything white was good. and everything black was bad. Going to school, you used to have teachers standing at the door with pencil running through your hair. If it was too natty, you have to go back and comb and those things, you know. These are the things that we were experiencing as youth. So it leaves a lot of question in our mind as to who we really are, you know. I decided that, you know what, I'm not going to travel to study. I'm going to stay right here in Jamaica and be as confrontational as I can in terms of the justice that I think was due to my people. Because honestly speaking, Winthrop, as youth, we were looking at revolution. Going to Cuba, studying warfare, coming back, make sure we know about time bomb, telescopic rifle and those. Because we were thinking about justice and how to get rid of this level of oppression. I started to look at a different way how to fight the struggle, because by that time I realized how important the mind was. Our people's mind were colonized into thinking they were inferior to other races. We have been really misled, miseducated, you know, brainwashed to thinking that we are nobodies, you know. There was a saying, if you're white, you're right. If you're brown, you can stick around. But if you're black, you have to stay at the back. So it wasn't, the discrimination wasn't coming from just white people. The discrimination was coming from the very people who you live with. I decided that as a Rastaman, I had no intention of going through those things. I made sure I went and studied law. We and the rich man could always be in his private quarters, smoking in her, doing what he wanted to do. But the police couldn't go up there. But the police would break down your door as a grassroots person and come in and lock you to a split. You know, this imperialist complex was still instilled within the mind of the people. So we were calling with reconstruction of the educational system to instill positivity in the mind of the people about themselves. Our people never realized that embarking on a ganja industry here in Jamaica, you're embarking on an economic fight.
Throppers, and welcome back to another episode of On Deck with Throp, where we have meaningful conversations all about Jamaica. And today we have a really special guest, someone I am honored to have on the podcast that I was supposed to have on many, many years ago. We have a member of the Cannabis Licensing Authority of Jamaica, a ganja activist, and that is none other than Ross Ivy. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Well, thanks, Winthrop, and thanks for having me, man, you know?
Yes.
I just say it is sort of overdue, but things never happened before time, you know?
Yes.
So again, give thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And as I was mentioning before, like, I'm really excited for this conversation. And when we were just outside taking the pictures, I didn't even realize that the cannabis event was 10 years ago, the first one. And that's actually how we first initiated, or at least around that time, maybe a couple years before that, how our friendship began. And it's just crazy to think how much time has gone by, but we're gonna get to that eventually. Right. To start with, I just want to kind of get a little bit of a history on your background and just share with the audience where you're coming from, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I was born on the plantation, the sugar plantation, you know, and I was born in a thatch hut. Yeah, and then those days, 70 years ago, it was what they call wattle and dab, you know, and so I was born. I can understand my family living on the plantation in barracks, you know, what they call the slave barracks. But it just happened that as a little youth, academically I was bright, and so I got a scholarship and went to Mannings. And at Mannings, you know, you start to rub shoulders as a youth coming from grassroots background, working class background. You start to rub shoulders with, you know, rich people, children, society, children, you know. But one thing I have always been, as a youth, I always hate injustice. And so that have stood out inside of me even to my manhood, you know. Remember at school, you know, going to school, they used to scrub you. you know, as a grub, and you go to first farm, third farmers, fourth farmers, hold there and scrub you. So at first farm, I started to fight because I didn't have any intention of taking any scrubbing from anybody, you know. So, you know, leaving high school, I work in the with establishment called Surrey Sugar Research Institute in the soil physics department, and really wanted to study electronics and electrical engineering. But the fact that as a youth and in the 60s, a lot of things were happening from a Black liberation point of view, you know. You had the Malcolm X assassination. You had Muhammad Ali refusing to go to Vietnam. You had the emergence of the Black Panther Party, and you know, people like Eldridge Cleaver, E.P. Newton, and you know, Malcolm X, like I said, Martin Luther King, Elijah Muhammad. All of those things were happening in the US. So they were impacting us as youth who, you know, were looking for a sense of identity, you know, a sense of pride in ourselves as Black youth, because, you know, growing up, everything white was good and everything Black was bad, you know. Going to school, you used to have teachers standing at the door with pencil running through your hair. And if it was too natty, you have to go back and comb and those things, you know. So Indian children were more appreciated. Well, we never have white children coming to our school at a primary level. It wasn't until I went to Manning's High School, you know. But these are the things that we were experiencing as youth. So it leaves a lot of questions in our mind as to who we really are, you know. And then from a Caribbean point of view, you know, we came and heard about Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We hear about Nanny Sunsharp Taki. Up to into 68, they turned back Walter Rodney, who was a Guyanese lecturing at the University at the West Indies Mona campus. That started a big demonstration. But all of those things now, I remember reading a book, Martin Luther King. Yes, it was Martin Luther, Why We Can't Wait, you know. So all of those things were impacting on I as a youth, and I decided that, you know what, I'm not going to travel to study. I'm going to stay right here in Jamaica and be as confrontational as I can in terms of the justice that I think was due to my people. So that is how I came in, because honestly speaking, Winthrop, as youth, we were looking at revolution, going to Cuba, studying warfare, coming back, you know, make sure we know about time bomb, telescopic rifle and those things, because we were thinking about justice and how to get rid of this level of oppression. But then now, Rastafari struck, and I started to look at a different way how to fight the struggle, because by that time, I realized how important the mind was, and that what was happening out there is that it was a mind control. So even though these chains were moved from our ancestors' hands and feet, but our people's mind were colonized into thinking they were inferior to other races. As such, you know, it pushed me now to do more research into who we are as a people, you know, because we were considered to be backward and primitive, have never considered and contributed anything to world civilization, you know. So when I started my research now, I found out that no, we have been really misled, miseducated, you know, brainwashed to thinking that we are nobodies, you know. And so the more research I did, you know, there's a song, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So that pushed me, and give thanks I was able to acquire information to the point that it instills confidence, because that's what knowledge do, you know. Knowledge instills confidence. And I remember hearing the word of Steve Biko, this revolutionary youth from South Africa, anti-apartheid activist, that said the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed. And so we realized that it first and foremost, it had to be a mind backer. So basically, that's my background growing up as a youth into manhood.
Wow, that is very powerful. And
Hello, everyone. Today, we're taking a closer look at a 1.5 megawatt / 3 megawatt hour containerized energy storage system.
when you say you were fighting injustice and you were making your considerations of almost going the violent way, and you found Rastafarianism, and you went that path instead, were you talking about injustices that were happening in Jamaica or all over the world?
Well, it was all over the world, but being here in Jamaica, you had to focus on what was happening, you know? And naturally, what was happening internationally was impacting what was happening here in Jamaica, you know? Because you remember in the 70s, the Michael Mann, the era came about, you know? And that was the first time that certain level of awakening, politically and otherwise, took place in Jamaica, because before that, when it comes to black activism, no. Because when in 1968 October, when Walter Rodney was turned back that conference in Canada, he wasn't coming from any Marxist or Leninist or communist event. He was coming from a black writers conference. And because being at university, he wrote a book called Grounding with My Brethren, which was the experience, the information, the knowledge he gathered from being amongst us. Being turned back from Jamaica was not because of just what was happening, but of the dictates that were coming from outside of Jamaica, coming to the political leadership of Jamaica. And in order to have this continuous colonial control, they had to move people who were at a level, for example, at the university level, that was impacting and influencing the minds of these youth now who would become future leaders of not only Jamaica, but the Caribbean region. So to make sure that you don't have this type of mindset, confrontational, revolutionary mindset confronting the system, you have to get rid of the source that was bringing this awareness to these youth. So get rid of Walter Rodney, and you are on the road to getting rid of a certain type of thinking. So it was that, like I say, in terms of your question, both what was happening, the injustices that was happening internationally and nationally. But if you remember, black youth, there was a saying, if you're white, you're right. If you're brown, you can stick around. But if you're black, you have to stay at the back, you know? And then being black now, even though I have Indian in me, but I used to be called you're black, what not, you know, by even Indian people, you know? So it wasn't, the discrimination wasn't coming from just white people. The discrimination was coming from the very people who you live with. But we all know it was the result of the you know, they're saying you're a product of your environment. Yeah. So people, because of what you've been taught in school and in the church, you tend to develop a mindset that everything good, everything white is good. Christ was painted white. The devil was painted black, you know? So those images leave continuous negative impression in the mind of our people and our youth about us as a people. And as such, the injustice now was not coming just by you being a grassroots youth, being locked up, but being discriminated against because you are black, even by your own black people. You know, these things were happening. And the next thing with Jamaica, the race issue is one, but the class issue, you know, and because, like I said, some of the discrimination was coming from your own black people. And this was not because you were black, but because you were in a so-called inferior class. And the class structure was based on your economic position, you know, your material position, and also your allegiance to whoever, whichever system, you know, whether it be religious system or it be political system or educational system, you know. So it was a confrontation in different aspects of injustices that were taking place in Jamaica, you know.
And that was, for perspective, like that was through the 60s, the 70s, 80s, like Jamaica at that time.
Yeah, well, coming up as a youth now, a teenager, I started experiencing that. And even as a youth before I was 10, but then coming into being teenager now, like in the 60s, you started to realize more in terms of why this was happening to you, you know? But like I say, in 65, Malcolm was assassinated. And in 68, Martin Luther King was assassinated, you know? So all of those things now impacted us as youth, you know, because we became more aware of the fact that once you come out and you talk against the system and you talk and you try to bring positive information about Black people, about themselves, then the great possibility exists that you'll be eliminated. So you had to becoming more aware of what was happening. You had to become more strategic in terms of how you about doing things, which was geared towards counteracting the negative impression that Black people had of themselves and the injustices that were taking place with our people in all its form. So we developed strategy, and some of those strategies was to take to the street, to march, you know, and we did that in a way that, for example, Marcus Garvey's birthday, you know, when the centenary came in 1987, we made sure we did a 7-day motorcade, because even though Marcus Mosiah Garvey is the first national hero of Jamaica and has impacted the world in a way that most Jamaicans don't know, up to other day, Marcus Garvey's name was still on the book of Jamaica as a criminal. You know what I mean? So we use those times strategically. When it came to February, Black History Month, we went out there too. You know, we had march, we had concert. So people couldn't say, or the system couldn't say we were going out there with guns to kill people or to burn down anywhere. But we were strategically using those occasions to get to the mind of the people and to remind them and to point out to them the different ways and means which we've been misled, miseducated. And as such, those misinformation has resulted in us being in a lower economic class. So, you know, like I said, we had to strategize, you know?
And I want to talk a little bit about that, the mind of the people. And you had kind of opened up with this realization of the colonization of our minds as Black people. And through your many years of activism and trying to reverse this or change this and get Black people to understand their worth and their value, their self-worth and their self-value, do you think things have drastically changed in terms of the education of people?
No, the educational system, no, has not changed. It has not changed much.
Okay.
Some changes have taken place in the sense that you have Caribbean studies. But for example, when we were marching as far back as 1987, we were calling on the government to make sure that the philosophy and opinion of Marcus Garvey is being taught in school. Until today, it is yet to be. You know what I mean? I mean, teachers use their own innovation and bring aspect of Marcus Garvey teaching into the school, but it is yet to be established as a part of the curriculum of even what we would call Caribbean history. You know?
Well, why do you think that is, that it hasn't been implemented?
Well, I think it's the continuous aim and objective of the system to keep our people ignorant of the significance
I see. Okay.
of who a Marcus Garvey is. Because in doing my research, I found out that even Malcolm's parents were Garveyites. People like Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta, and a lot of these African leaders, the early African leaders, they were influenced by Marcus Garvey. Even until today, there's a youth named P.L.O. Lumumba, who does a lot of lecturing. He always refer to Marcus Garvey. The AU conference the other day, February, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, was focused on Pan-Africanism and had to take into account Marcus Garvey's philosophy, So we don't know the power and the impact that Marcus Garvey had. And I think that if, for example, it was to be a part of the curriculum, then our students would come up with a mindset that would feel more belonging, more responsible in terms of, moving Jamaica as an island with 98% Black people, moving it forward. Because the level of poverty and suffering that our people continue to experience, I don't think it is something that had to be. I think it's something that could have been prevented if the system wanted to. Agriculture could have been more vibrant. We could have been more independent in terms of our food. We could, So there's a lot of things that could have been done better if, for example, the educational system was so geared and so structured that our youth come up and feel. In other words, the educational system would and should establish a level of patriotism in our youth that them come up and feel belonging to something. And as such, being belonging to something, you're going to protect that. But right now, our youth come up and they don't care one thing because they have not been taught, their minds have not been molded in that way, in that responsible way, in that patriotic way. So, the work continues. We still have a lot of work to do, but the educational system needs to change. I think it's a better approach in the Eastern Caribbean because I think the political leadership in the Eastern Caribbean is more aware of what is needed, and they are not only aware, but they are implementing programs that can bring changes, meaningful changes, economic changes to the masses of the people, unlike what I see happening in Jamaica,
And on that same line with the youth now in 2025,
Did you know cinnamon can help support healthy BP? Here's the recipe, page 32. This recipe is so easy.
I was going to ask, do you feel a sense of confidence in any way in terms of the trajectory that our youth are going, in terms of going from being a young man or young woman and moving into adulthood and then eventually becoming a professional, hopefully?
I don't see the youth then coming up in a way that we can't say down the road will be better off. No, I don't see it. Why? Because we don't see much opportunities being created for the youth. We don't see training centers. For example, I spoke about agriculture. And just the other day, we had tomatoes selling for $1,200 a pound, $800 a pound. One look at hand of banana is $112, So now you have tomatoes, $100 a pound. So my question is, where is the agro-processing industry in Jamaica? And to me, I spent 8 years and more than 8 years on the radio. And what I used to do, I used to have a lot of agricultural discussion on my program. I used to go to RADA. I used to go to the 4-H club. I used to go to the high school and beg them to make sure that agriculture in their school program. So in terms of the youth now, if, for example, an agro-processing, the next thing is that not every youth that go to school going to come out with 10 and 15 CXC.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that they don't have any ability to contribute. So to me, the education system should be structured in a way that you assess a youth and find out what he or she is good at and build on that. Just don't throw away the youth because he never have 6 CXC or 10 CXC, and then you are going to say he's done. The youth who get 10 CXC might not be as knowledgeable and as skillful as that youth who never gets any, but that youth is very good at woodwork, or good at straw work. But assess him, assess her, find out what they are good at, and then build on that. So, you know, in so doing, you guarantee that the youth then coming up will have a better future. But as it is now, I don't see it because joblessness is rampant. In most communities, is very few youth that are employed in those two. So they have to be creative in terms of how do they earn, how do they achieve. And such, you see a lot of robbery taking place because of the lack of opportunity and the lack of training, you know, and the lack of motivation to, because our youths are not being motivated in a way that them can say overcome these barriers and obstacles, you know, because they don't see a future. You know, I reason with youth, and what they tell me, you know, some of them when I'm going out to rob, anything is anything, you know. Then dead tomorrow, so be it. This is not the mindset that we want our youth to grow with, you know. Yeah. But again, the system, the church, and the school have a big role to play. I mean, the environment, yes, but the church and the school, that's what get to the minds of the youth more than almost anything, because it starts to get to the minds of the youth as youth, as babies actually. So, you know, a lot more need to be done in order that we can look forward and say, yes, as Severian, we're going to have a better future and some better young youths coming up in the future. No, at the moment, I don't see.
And you had made mention of an opportunity in agriculture. And my father he's like a huge proponent of that, like that Jamaica should be producing its own food and should be self-sustaining. But there is, like you said, this gap of like, how do we get younger people into farming? Because there's a incredibly huge demand, and it's such a huge opportunity. And there is money to be made, but it's not fast money. You know, farming, and my dad has a saying, you reap what you sow. Yeah. And you can't plant orange and reap banana. And he's been preaching that since I was born, probably. But I firmly believe and agree that is a really good opportunity. But again, how do we push more youth in that direction?
When I was growing up in Chop, at primary school, when it comes to, for example, at Thursday, you had half day school in the morning, but in the afternoon, every one of us as boys had to go into the farm, right? Girls had to go into what they call home economics. Some learned to sew, some learned to bake, but it was all a training to make you into a better person and into a more responsible person. So you cannot wait until you turn 18, 19, and 20 and in reaching tertiary institution before you can introduce agriculture. But then you introduce it at the primary level. So a youth don't feel aware to dirty up his hand, because he has been doing that from him was a kid. So if you go to high school, is no big thing. In youth to put him hand in the earth, you know? So in that way, both the training and what you try to implant in the mind of the youth in terms of why it is important for you to know about farming, why it is important for us as a people to be self-sufficient with our food as much as possible, because anybody who feeds you in Winthrop can either starve you or poison you, you know. So food.
Okay, we made a deal. Who gets toned first? Me or mother with teaching?
In other words, food can be used as a weapon, and it has been used as a weapon. You know what I mean? Before, because we were to go into certain history and see even in India how the British used food to starve Indians. So we know anybody in political leadership of a country must realize the importance of food, and as such, do everything that you can to be as independent as possible where your food is concerned. And, you know, like I say, you have to introduce agriculture to the youth from they are less than 10, from them in primary school, you know, and you get them to think in terms of the importance of it.
I think that's so important, especially with what's going on with the world right now. Like
Right.
it's everybody is becoming at least like these big nations are just becoming so focused on themselves
Right.
and not really concerned about what's happening with other countries, especially small countries like Jamaica.
Right.
And there's these trade wars going on, and you know, I can see us. I'm not trying to stoke any fear out there or anything like that, but I can see us being a casualty in it, and we have nothing to do with it. I think
Right.
that can easily happen if we don't focus on that.
You see, just other day I was listening to Mia Mottley, the prime minister, the prime minister from Barbados, and she was pointing out, which is a reality, which we knew this from decades ago. When you go into the supermarket, the vast majority of the food on the shelves in Winthrop do not come from Jamaica or the Caribbean.
It's scary.
It's produced outside. And we know those foods are not better than the food that are produced here. As a matter of fact, they are of less quality.
Yes.
So why is it that we shouldn't be encouraging our youth into agro industry in order for self-sufficiency with food, but also to help our youth to earn? Because look at the amount of things Grace exporting all over the world, right? But they have to be produced. So the more our youth are encouraged, the more economic opportunity out there for them in agriculture. You know, so it go back to the training. What is it that you try to implant into the minds of our youth? You know?
Yeah.
So
Throp here again. As you're probably hearing, Jamaica is on an unprecedented economical tear, and I know many people are interested to learn how they might be able to buy property in Jamaica, move here, or even start a business.
Just to say, this is my first time watching this. I hadn't seen it before, but I know the elder Aya V. This must be some kind of redone thing, I'm thinking. You know, reissue, because the elder passed a few years ago. And I was just looking at it, I was like, doggone, what are they doing? Are they able to have AI bring up his words or something? I don't know. But I know the elder and he and his wife, Ita, they both passed a few years ago. So I just want to say that this is the man I really listened to. We discussed. He was a great friend of mine. And so what he's looking at is the same thing I was looking at. He was looking at agriculture, and I was discussing, we were discussing these things he's talking about. And I was talking about manufacturing, because you have to manufacture and make things, as I say, make things, you got to make things. So the idea is that the entire time that this interview, I don't know where it's going to go from here. I'll search ahead and see for a minute, but I wanted to put it on as soon as possible. Here he is. He's back. Hold on.
For Jamaicans who are looking for an opportunity, who are living abroad and part of the diaspora, to come back to Jamaica. I think it's huge opportunity, and I encourage them in that sense. Want to switch gears a little bit onto your ganja activism,
Right.
and I know that is in many ways something that's very, very near and dear to your heart, and a big part of your advocacy. And I know you fight for been fighting for a lot of ganja farmers and their rights, and Jamaica. I remember back in, I was alluding to in the opening, back in 2015, 2014, even like the decriminalization of ganja back then. What year was that? 2013?
Well, if
The decriminalization of marijuana?
It was 2015.
2015. Okay, 2015. I had it. Okay. And that was like a big deal for Jamaica. And I would like you to kind of give us an idea of what things were like before that actually happened, and what was your fight before that?
And very interesting question, Winthrop, because a lot of people don't know what our people went through and what Rastafari went through. But as youth coming up, and coming from the working class background, as a youth, I was always exposed to herb, and because herb was a big thing amongst the people, There was a positive saying about herb, even though there was a negative saying, because some people say you smoke herb, it will mad you. But there was a next saying, say, who smoke herb and who drink herb tea and so on, bright, So anyway, what I found out was that, especially in the 60s, after the Coral Garden incident, which down the road we can go into that, but before that, there was like a fine for herb, nothing big. But after the Coral Garden incident, there was a law that came about that if you were caught with a seed or a leaf and found guilty in the court, it was mandatory that you go to prison for 18 months.
What?
Yes. Mandatory. The judge had no discretionary powers. Once you were found guilty, it was mandatory that you go to prison for 18 months. If having one conviction of possession, you were caught with one plant, it was also mandatory that you go to prison for 5 years. If you had one conviction of possession and you were caught with a next seed, not even a spliff, not even a spliff, a seed or a leaf, you'd go to prison for 3 years.
It's crazy.
Yes, you would go to prison because that was a second conviction. Now, if you had 2 convictions of possession and was found with one plant, you would go to prison for 7 years. So these are the things that we as a people went through. And as a Rasta youth now, I became involved in Rastafari while that was the law. So I decided that as a Rastaman, I had no intention of going through those things. So I made sure I went and studied the law, both from a United Nations point of view and from a Jamaican constitutional point of view. And so that is where I started my confrontation. At the time, in the 60s, coming up to 1972, when Michael Manley regime came into power, then the laws were amended, but you could still go to prison for herb, but it was mandatory that you go to prison. So, and as a Rastaman now, looking at the law and looking at the Constitution and one's constitutional rights, where both the UN and the Jamaican Constitution give you the right, the freedom, of religious belief, political belief, and so on, So, as such, my approach was, if the Christians want to use wine and bread as their sacrament, fine. I have no problem with it. That's their thing. But if I and I as Rastafari choose to use a plant, which we didn't create, was created by the Almighty, whoever we consider the Almighty or whatever we consider the Almighty to be, but we know that the Almighty created the plant. And in the Bible, in Genesis 1:29-30, it says, behold, I green herb, all vegetable fruit, and nuts, all feeding, yielding plants have I given to you as meat. So one time I called Garnet Roper on the radio, and I asked him, because he was talking against herb, I asked him if when the Bible said that, if ganja was excluded, he asked me what benefit do I get from ganja smoking. I said I wasn't talking about ganja smoking. I was talking about ganja as a plant, So based on my knowledge of constitutional rights, I became very confrontational, very, very confrontational. Much more, what was happening is that most of who were going to prison and jail were grassroots people and Rasta people, right? We and the rich man could always be in his private quarters, smoking him herb, doing what he wanted to do, but the police couldn't go up there. But the police would break down, kick down your door as a grassroots person and come in and lock you up your spliff.
And this is going back to your classism situation with Jamaica.
Right. So when we've been doing ganja marches, we did that as a part of the Marcus Garvey centenary celebration. We were writing letters to the government. And in 1991, we had a reenactment of the visit of His Majesty. But in all of those outdoor activities, we were calling on the government to decriminalize. We didn't call for legalization because we know they were not in the position based on the treaties that they have signed, like the 1961 Single Convention. And they were obligated, and the failure to live up to certain expectation or the treaty, what the treaty require, embargo could be established against. So we were very aware of, the possibilities of, the so-called powers that be, for example, the US and the EU establishing embargo against Jamaica. So we didn't call for what we know wasn't achievable. We called for decriminalization. We start lock up a youth, a little jar, But so in 1996, we did one of the biggest things we ever did in Jamaica. We had a big ganja march in Kingston to celebrate the centenary of the victory of Adowa. Adowa is in the victory in 1896 when Italians invaded Ethiopia, but were conquered on the 1st of March, 1896. That time Menelik was emperor, and His Majesty's father, Haile Selassie's father, Ras Makonnen, was a general in the army. So we used the occasion to have this big ganja march. Then in 2000, we were having a Nyabingi celebration in Grange in Westmoreland, and we wrote a letter to P.J. Patterson, and we sent it to the press. We hand-delivered it to Jamaica House, and it was about the restructuring of the educational system, because up to that point, Black people was highly miseducated about themselves, and this imperialist complex was still instilled within the mind of the people. So we were calling, for the reconstruction of the educational system to instill positivity in the minds of the people about themselves. So we also wanted to discuss the issue of reparation and repatriation, and then the whole issue of legalization, decriminalization. That audience was never granted to us because we were calling on PG Patterson to sit with us as Rastafari and see how these things could be dealt with in a way that is beneficial to our people. And like I say, we didn't get that audience with PG Patterson. Anyway, it came down to 2013, 2012, 2013, when we started to hear about this, what was happening now with CBD oil and how it was helping people with seizure and other ailments. So in 2013, there was this talk now that Jamaica was not going to allow the ganja board to leave them, and that there was plan to decriminalize or to amend the law, what they call the Dangerous Drug Act. So we realized, having been traveling, going different places, I realized that, you see, if poor people, traditional ganja farmers and Rastafari didn't put themselves together, we would be locked out of this industry, right? Having gone to places like Boston, and in Massachusetts, Maine, New England in particular, went to California, went to Colorado, see what was happening. You had to have money to even have a dispensary. So we decided that the only way we could counteract that was to start putting ourselves together. And that's what 2014 now, we established the first Ganja Farmers Association in the island. I remember when I went to the police station for the permit and brought in the application for the permit, the superintendent said to me, Ross, ganja is still illegal. I said, yeah. But to have a Ganja Farmers Association is not illegal. He said, no. So I said, that's what we're talking about. So we launched it on the 9th of March, 2014. And we encourage the other parishes now to do the same thing. In so doing, our intention was that the parishes now would come together and form a national association, which would enable we as grassroots people to have a greater bargaining power at the table. Because, like I said, we knew that if we didn't do that, we would be locked out of the industry. And even though we did, we were still and have still been locked out of the industry, because being a member of the board, I was invited to be a part of the board when the CLA was established in 2015.
That's the Cannabis Licensing Authority for everybody.
Right. Was established. I was invited to be a part of the board. And my concern to them was, how is grassroots people, those who have suffered and bore the brunt of the persecution, being involved with her, how are they going to benefit? And two, what is going to be done to ensure and guarantee that we don't establish a next sugarcane industry, a tourism industry, where the money don't come and it don't stay in Jamaica, but it's gone out to the big investors. So at the board level, the 51% Jamaican ownership was established. But that was all on paper, but could be easily beaten. There were always loopholes that people can. So anyway, my thing was, from that angle, from that point, the concern about poor people. So being there up till 1921, I remember saying to them in 2019 that when we started to put the regulations together, we did so cautiously, bearing in mind the fact that Jamaica had certain economic obligation internationally. But after all these years, let us now look at the regulation, see how these regulations can be amended to ensure and guarantee easier participation of our people in this industry. that didn't happen. The other thing is that I keep pointing to them that the more difficult you make it for grassroots people to participate in the industry, is the more they are going to stay in the industry that you're trying to get them out of, which is what you call the illicit industry. Because if you outfinance them, and that has been their way of living all of these years, what you expect them to do? Drop that all of a sudden and go, look, no, they're not going to do. They're going to stick with it. Again, in 2016, I was invited to the United Nations, and we're talking about alternative ways to these youths being involved in smuggling drugs and so on and so on. And I pointed out to them that in the first place, the economic imbalance that exists internationally is a leftover of slavery and colonialism.
Of course.
Anthony. And these youth coming up with in poverty-stricken condition, but see all these material things being dangled in front of them eyes. They are going to do anything. And when I say anything, I mean anything to lift themselves from the poverty-stricken condition. So they will jeopardize their life and they will jeopardize them to lift themselves. So unless the powers that be do things to eradicate poverty from the face of the earth, how do we guarantee that these youths are going to stop jeopardizing them life and them liberty in order to lift themselves from the poverty-stricken condition that we find ourselves in? So, again,
I just want to say something about this, what he was saying. Him and I had long discussions like this about this particular topic, how to get the youth involved, all that kind of stuff. Like he was saying to get the youth involved through farming because he's a farmer. And now I'm farming, but how to get the youth involved from my point of view is manufacturing, because you have to cover all phases of society in order to get the society up and running, which is what, we were considering. And I see now a lot of people talk about different identities they hold, identities they hold at this time. However, I like to see I do not see a bunch of really stuff going down to support that type of identity. And the people who identify themselves, it don't even matter what they identify themselves as. I don't see how they are supporting themselves in that identity as a group of people. So I want that to be, that's why I listened to this dude, because Aya V was a very wise man. I suggest I'm gonna play the rest of it because I want you to know that that's how I see it.
Come back to our youth here.
Oh, and I put the what they call it, the thing for StreamYard. So if somebody wants to do the StreamYard thing, it's right there on the bottom, and we could speak about it. Because what I want to do is set up. I'm already contemplating. I've talked to a couple of elders, my elders, already about what I'm contemplating. And so this is like the kickoff, because Aya V has already been interviewed. So I'm getting a lot to learn and how to set it up so that we can be, comparable. I'll let him finish.
Our people here who have been in this ganja production all of these years, and now an industry come that they should have been a part of, benefiting meaningfully from the sacrifices that they have made, that have given Jamaican ganja the international reputation, recognition that it has internationally. But here it is, they are locked out. So if you continue to lock them out, they are going to continue illicit market and illicit activities. But until now, I have been re-invited to the board since last year, and I am there. And that is still the issue. That is still what I have to be putting forward to the board. What is the board prepared to do? What is the government prepared to do to make sure that our traditional ganja farmers have a say and have a part in this industry, and that it does not continue to stay in the hand of only rich people, some of those who used to fight against the industry. So at the moment, basically, this is where it is at.
Wow, I'm sad to hear that because as we opened up with, this has been 10 years at this point, almost 10 years. And I remember, I just want to paint the picture for everybody a little bit, that when the decriminalization happened in 2015, and then also the announcement of the Ganja Festival, Times Magazine,
Right.
it was this crazy buzz. And it was like everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry, was trying to come to Jamaica. They just saw dollar signs, and
Right.
that's what I was seeing. And we were just getting, my dad was more involved in the hotel here, and he was just getting phone calls just from complete strangers. You should just show up at the hotel, and they were looking to partner because, as you mentioned, one of the requirements was 51% Jamaican owned.
Right.
And I remember having these meetings with a lot of Canadians,
Right.
a lot of people from Colorado and California, just showing up, and they were just trying to get in and to partner with us. And I even think I put a couple of them onto you, sent them your way.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Look,
it was just like this gold rush in a sense.
Exactly.
And I was also like, that was also my concern. I was just like, man, I was happy that the 51% requirement existed,
Right.
but also, like you
About a month after we had the launch. So we established very, very close relationship. So in 2015, April,
Okay.
While the amendment was taking place here, I was in Colorado. I was invited.
I had I had lost the internet for a moment. It's back up. I appreciate it. I'll get the thing back on. But I wanted to say that I worked with this elder here about legalization of marijuana because, as he said, the marijuana was deemed illegal as one of the. He didn't just say it like I'm saying it, as one of the black laws. That's how Code Nor. That's how it was done in the states as a Code Nor, and they made herb illegal based on that because they did that to say anything that we did naturally, they just make it illegal, and that way they can keep arresting people and enslaving them. So that's what they were doing and suppressing their ambitions because the rich people don't want the poor people not to be poor. They need them to be poor so the rich people can stay rich. So poor people going to rich people trying to get something, they'll give them a crumb and that's it. They're not giving up their stuff. So that's why I say to poor people, as people say they are poor, is poor as a matter of poor in mind, like the elder here is saying. The mind has been convinced, and so the body follows. There used to be a saying, free your mind and your ass will follow. That was from the 60s, the time that the elders started with in this conversation. I forget, some group did a whole musical on it. Free your mind and your ass will follow. It's a common thing that was going on in the 60s because people were attempting to not only free their mind, but free their people. And so all of this stuff has been going on, and it's actually a sequence of events in a historical content, which is just a narrative. When you say you got a historical content, it actually is history is just a narrative of the past. So now you got this elder talking about what happened in the past, and the next elder be talking about what happened in the past, stuff like that. So then the best thing to do is to continue the work that has already been done, but you have to know it so you'll know where to pick up at, what gear you're in. Otherwise, you're just grinding the transmission. So when you know what gear you're in, you know where to put the lever so you can go and catch the gear and keep on moving at a quicker pace. And what the time is to move forward. So like I said, I got the attitude of the elder on his level, and I want to finish this up, and then that'll be the end of that. I appreciate it. If you're watching, I appreciate it when you're watching. Check it out.
Invited by High Times at one of them events. And Winthrop, I have never, ever seen an event so organized. Yeah. The first day, the Friday, you had more than 25,000 people. Wow. The second day, you had more than 35,000 people.
That's crazy.
You had rooms and rooms, different conferences were taking place on different subject matter, whether it was light, whether it was planting, whether it was law, whether it was whatever. All of these rooms were filled. All of these rooms were, I'm talking about professional presentation. Both when you're talking about botany, you're talking about, like I said, technology. But so what I saw in Colorado now opened my eyes. You had more than 600 booths. Wow. Not people, you know. 600 booths, and there are times I get to understand in Vegas, when you have ganja event, you have 1,800 booths. So when I went to Colorado now, and I said, what? This is what it is. You have some booths where just books and ganja. For example, I got a book named Cannabis Encyclopedia. So when I saw what was happening, I said, no. We've been planting herb here in Jamaica for years, but we don't know about this. So that was 2015. But 2014, the then Minister of Justice, Mark Golding, and it happened that we were interacting with the Maroons, Charlestown Maroon in particular. So we all went up there, and each one we getting to know each other. So Mark Golding and Professor Nesson, who is the Harvard Law professor, and Michael Kennedy, who was the then CEO of High Times, they met and decided that it would be good to have a ganja event here in Jamaica. So then they came down 2015, even before I went to Colorado, and we had a meeting in Mark Golding's office, and that is how the whole idea and the whole decision in terms of having an event here in Jamaica was decided. But the real reason I wanted to have one was to bring the science and the technology that exists in the international arena, cannabis arena, to Jamaica, so we can now see what is happening internationally, and as such, prepare ourselves now for the international market, bearing in mind the standards that would have been required, and so on. So, like I said, so that was my main reason of bringing that type of event here. But we also met a group of people from Oaksterdam, the only legal ganja university up to that time. They teach from seed to buds legally in California. And they take the name, it's in Oakland, but they take the name of Amsterdam, so they call it Oaksterdam. And I remember in 2012, the government shut down everything that they were doing, took away their laptop and so on, everything that they were doing. But they persisted and so on. So they became one of our educational partners. They would come down here, they would teach about cloning, they would teach about the difference between root and cloning, seed and cloning. So it was all educational. And as you say, the level of vibrancy and enthusiasm that was there, people were coming from all over Jamaica because they have never, ever seen an event like this where police is going to be there, but herb is going to be burned, and you can travel with the herb. So it was a whole, positive expectation. But like I say, eventually, one of the things that has happened to the industry here, if people are not good at accounts or math, you don't put them in the bank. So you don't put people to manage, for example, herb when they don't know anything about it, and they don't know anything about what is happening internationally and so on. Our people never realize that embarking on a ganja industry here in Jamaica, you're embarking on an economic fight. Right? Now, when you look at what is happening in US, 30 odd states have legalized for medical purposes, and maybe 15, 16 now for recreational purposes. Yet, Jamaica.
My husband agreed to clean the house for 6 months if this lazy 7-minute workout actually changed my body shape. He thought.
Couldn't use the term recreational in trying to establish an industry here. You had to look at the loophole that exists within the International Narcotics Convention and establish an industry, and the only industry that could have been established here was a medical one, right? And such Mark Walling them and the government of Jamaica at that time used that medical aspect to strategically establish industry. Now, Canada, Israel, they are big ganja producing nation. The access that they have to the international market, Jamaica doesn't have that. Jamaica also is viewed as a narco producing country and a narco in transshipment point. So Jamaica is under the radar. And as such, our people never realized that our leadership and the people at CLA didn't realize that it would have been a head-on economic battle that we would have been embarking on. So the international market is little or none for Jamaica. Because what is going to take place is that if you look at what is happening in China, China is producing hemp on a big basis. This just like how there's a monopoly, or people trying to have a monopoly on seeds. If you remember, as youth growing up, we could squeeze tomato in the ground and it would grow. And we'd plant those tomatoes and get tomato from it. Now, if you get a tomato and squeeze that seed in the ground, it is not going to grow because they are GMO food, GMO seeds. So what has happened now is that the type of seeds that we have gotten here in Jamaica is of less medicinal quality than what we used to produce in the 60s or in the 70s or in the 80s, because we used to produce sativa that had to stay 6-7 months in the ground, exposed to sunlight. Now, most of these herbs that are grown in the US and Canada are grown under light, because with these few months in summer, they cannot produce the amount that they would want to. So we in Jamaica now, we had to look, and we need to look at the low-hanging fruit. What is it that we can do here in Jamaica to utilize our herb that we have without have to be in this big competition internationally? Remember, there was an industry before, the so-called medical industry. Do we abandon that, or do we look at how we can utilize that aspect? For example, people were planting herb in the hills, have them hammock, side water stream. Tourists used to go up there, find them, hang out in hammocks, you know what I mean? Eat actual food or other food, some roast fish. And so I could see how, and I've said this to the CLA board, I could see how we can utilize, how we can encourage people to utilize that aspect of the industry. In other words, the low-hanging fruit. How can we get sick people, patients, to come to Jamaica at a ganja healing center, where hotels, a portion of any particular hotel that can be used, where you have medical personnel, can diagnose what it is that you have and can recommend. For example, I have a Rasta brethren who's a doctor in California, in Miami, named Dr. Anthony Hall. You might have met him because he came to Rootfest all the time. He is one of 5 doctors up to a time gone, and in the state of Florida, that could prescribe herb to his patient. He built formulas, how to combine different CBDs for different illnesses. So I'm saying, why is it that we don't look at how we can bring, just like how people go to Florida in the winter for medical purposes? Why is it that we don't encourage our people to look at this aspect of the industry, engage the medical personnel, so when they come into professional settings, you know what I mean? And then you use the fruit juice, your vegetable juices, and all of these things. So, in other words, the farmers will be benefiting, the taxi people will be benefiting, everybody will benefit if you just look at the industry from this point of view rather than just the international market. We would love to have the international market because people coming here invest, want to make money. But what if there's not that access to the international market? Do we abandon the program, or do we look at alternative ways in how we can utilize the industry so that our people can benefit?
And when you say, excuse me, and when you say like the access to international market, are you talking about exporting ganja from Jamaica? That's
exporting.
what you mean.
Whether you're exporting the raw bud or the byproducts.
Okay.
For example, the oil or the creams or so on. One thing is that there's a term called GMP, good manufacturing process. Most of these countries want products coming out of these type of facilities. And we hardly have any of these facilities that are internationally accredited. I know one, I don't know if you know that, her name Grace Marr. The person who she is with, a good friend from California named Scott Cathcart. He has a company named 710 and Gillife. But he is the only company in Jamaica to have gotten high THC product to be approved by the DEA to come into the US to be tested on the company.
Wow.
But he is very scientific. He was a part of a company in California. The first set of non-governmental lab was owned by this company, Steve Hill. So he has been in the science of the industry from a long time and is bringing that to Jamaica. But for the time being, I should be going to have an uphill task because...
Commander, welcome back. The station has been waiting. Let me show you around. This is the mech bay. Our armored units, silent but ready.
This is the first time I've seen this, so I haven't heard a lot of what he's talking about directly from this interview. So I'm just letting it go on and continue because it's the first time for me, and I guess the first time for whoever may watch this. I appreciate you checking it out, and it's informative in a historical fashion, and I thought it might be worth your while to see what it is. But you check that out for yourself. I'll go on.
Legalize down the road, somewhere or the other, because they are looking at this from an economic point of view. And they are going to be producing all type of products. And to me, the international market is going to get saturated. So saturated that places like Jamaica will have little or no access to that international market. And that's the sad part of it, because like any other thing, when these big countries come and realize the potential of certain products, they are going to want to manipulate it and take control of it to the detriment of the small countries that originally used to be persecuted. I remember what Jamaica went through, you know. Jamaica went through, remember when Air Jamaica was flying, you know. They called it the Ganja plane. How many times Air Jamaica was detained in the US? I mean, to these smaller countries, I was in St. Vincent the other day, and when the Minister of Agriculture, Sabota, was talking about his experience as a 7-year-old youth, seeing the helicopters then coming into St. Vincent, and people have to be running up and down, cutting up themselves, and look and see people coming out of the hills, bleeding, and tear up and rocks, you know? So this is what our people and our countries, small countries, Caribbean countries, went through. But now, while that was happening, the ganja industry in America was being developed. Research upon research was being carried out to develop products. When you look at the amount of hemp products in the US, and those hemp products are finding them way on the Jamaican shelves, whether in the pharmacy or in the supermarket. Yes, it is happening. It is happening. Other day we had to draft up, and when I say before I left the board in 2021, we had to have serious confrontation and dialogue with the Ministry of Health. Because there are certain companies that say they got permit from the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health is denying it to import hemp product. Now, I am saying we cannot export anything from herb into the US because federally it is said to be illegal, irrespective of the fact that the vast majority of the American people have voted for the legalization. And I question who is the federal government? Only a handful of people that can. You said America is a democratic country, and these people have voted for the legalization of gun. Why is it that at a federal level it is still illegal?
And even to draw parallels with Jamaica and America, Black people in America have been disproportionately locked up for herb as well.
Exactly.
And it's just so crazy to me, being somebody who's born and raised in New York and seeing so many people get locked up for the smallest of spliffs, and a lot of people going to jail for a long time for like just really, really small possessions. And now people have these multi-million-dollar businesses, and it's not us.
No,
it's not us. And it's just so like such a slap in the face. Like, it's just unbelievable to me. And there are people still in jail for right now for crimes that they committed years and years ago. And now it has been deemed legal. And like you said, it's moving towards a situation where it's going to be federally legal across the board. It's just so crazy. And that the powers that be and the leaders don't see it that way. And even, not even talking about reparations, but even putting those people, especially the people who have suffered unjustly for this, in a position to
benefit for what they have suffered for.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is the very least that should happen at this point in time, the very, very least. And, with that, so you don't believe or see a situation where Jamaica will be put in a position that it will be able to export these products to the United States?
I see down the road, if Jamaica have access to the US market, it will be in very small quantities. Because if you look at what is happening now in the US and what Trump is doing and the type of tariff, and so on, there is a protectionist policy coming from the US. And as such, they are going to want to protect their ganja industry in there. The same thing Canada is saying right now, and has been saying for years, that they don't intend to allow the importation of ganja into Canada because that is going to destroy their farmers' opportunity. Now, I remember being at the CLA, and we had delegation leaving Jamaica going to Canada because it was the hope. If you remember, I think there was a G7 conference that was taking place in Canada one time that Trudeau invited owners. It was our hope, and this was the basis on which the discussion were taking place, that Canada would have been used as an in-transshipment point for Jamaican ganja. Not that Jamaican ganja would go and stay in Canada, but for example, Germany wanted herb. They weren't growing herb. I was in a conference in Panama years back, and they wanted herb. So we were hoping that Canada would have been used as. But let us look at our own wrong move. Here is an industry that falls under different ministries. You had the Ministry of Justice, according to the amendment 2015. You had the Ministry of Justice talking about sacramental rights for Rastafari, right? You had Ministry of Science and Technology that was responsible for giving orders, for example, to do research and development, for example, the UEU Tech in a private information institution. But then I had the ministry at the time, it was MICAF, Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, which is now Ministry of Industry and Commerce. The CLA, the Cannabis Licensing Authority, falls under that ministry. While we are trying to develop our industry, the very minister that is responsible for that ministry gave permit to a company to import ganja from Canada to Jamaica.
What?
Now, the very minister, that is supposed to be responsible for the growth and development of the industry, you allow the importation of ganja into Jamaica. What are you saying to us?
Yeah.
The conclusion that I come to is when Bob say, you're trying to kill this before it grows. And it's only when people hit out against it that the government, had to stop that. But how do you justify that?
Yeah.
And you, 140 kilograms of herb, and you said that is coming for research purpose. I have access to Health Canada data. And for more than 3 years, Winthrop, Canada did not import more than 27-point-something kilograms of herb into Canada for research purpose. Not anything named commercial. Right? So you now can tell me that you are taking in 300 pounds of herb, 140 kilograms for research purpose. But over 3 years, Canada did not take in more than 27-point-something kilograms. So these are the hypocrisy. You understand me? That we have to be confronting in order to ensure and guarantee the growth and development of an industry that is very few countries that have the reputation where that particular industry, ganja, is concerned. Few countries, if any at all, that have the reputation. I remember time gone when I used to be a part of this whole ganja moving thing. And in the Caribbean in particular, you have Colombian, you have Mexican herb, you have vintage herb, but when Jamaican herb come, believe me, everything park. And them only can access the market when the Jamaican herb. And New York, you see the impact of Jamaican. So the only way Jamaican herb was having that type of impact and that access to that type of market in New York and other places in the US is because the benefit that people were getting from it. You know what I mean? People smoke. People used to come to Jamaica, remember, in the 60s when the hippies were coming here. Them come here because them get good herb. You know what I mean? So that is a reputation that Jamaica have where herb is concerned. So why not build on that reputation rather than to kill the industry, rather where you as a minister are supposed to be responsible for helping to grow and develop, and develop. So these are the type of things now that we are confronted with. And people's voice, because whether it be this P, whether it's PNP, or GLP, government, the people's voice need to be heard and to be respected and recognized and respected. If you look at what is happening politically in Jamaica and voter turnout, it is been getting less and less and less. Just other day, the last election, 30% of the electorate voted. I remember there was a time when 37% of the electorate voted. So any government come into power is always a minority government. Now, not voting is one, but how do we come together to make our voices be heard? And that is a situation that we are confronted with because, like I said, any party come in power is a minority government. And we cannot just sit by and watch political leaders doing what they want to do, and we just sit by and allowing it. We need to have a voice in terms of how Jamaica is governed, whether we vote for PNP or we vote for JLP.
Someone stuck with me through the whole show. I mean, that's beautiful.
Need other people to have a voice. So we have to put religious differences aside, party politics differences aside, whether we're educated, we're not educated, but we have to come together as a people. And that is something that our people is yet to realize, that partisan politics have divided us. Yes. Religious denomination have divided us. So we have a task, how to get to our people, to point out to them that we should not allow these things to divide us. When our ancestors were coming here on the slave ship, we never have PNP or JLP. Like we never come here as Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, or anything. We came here as enslaved African people. So we now need, our generation now need to look at how do we put those differences aside, come together as a people, and stand up to what I know is ours and what is right.
Well said, Ross Ivy. No, thank you very much. I was going to ask you if you wanted to, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you wanted to say or any messaging that you wanted to get out to the audience here before we
Well, I just want to refer to Marcus Garvey. He said that people without a knowledge of their past history and culture, like a tree without root. It's funny enough now that when I was going to school, we were taught history. Now, in school, history is not a must anymore. And I am saying that history should be a must. You will never, ever know where you belong unless you know where you're coming from. You'll never know your destiny unless you know your history. So, other people, we need to make it a point of our duty to learn more about ourselves. Not ourselves as where it started in slavery, but who we are and who we were as a people before slavery and colonialism. And I'm sure we are going to be surprised to see the contribution that we have made to serve civilization.
I just heard him say something. Hold on a minute.
The first university was in Africa. How many?
I just heard him say something I want to make a comment on. I'm going to go back to it because I want to refer to it.
Without a knowledge of their past history and culture.
Okay.
So we have to put religious differences aside.
I agree with that.
Politics differences aside.
I agree with
that.
That.
Educated, we're not educated, but we have to come together as a people. And that is something that our people is yet to realize, that partisan politics have divided us. Religious denomination have divided us. So we have a task, how to get to our people, to point out to them that we should not allow these things to divide us. When our ancestors were coming here on the slave ship, we never have PNP or JLP. Right?
Let me make a statement about that, because I know people who were enslaved in America, and they went on what they call slave ships to the West Indies, or the islands of the colonies, the colony islands that they had set up their different types of colonies there to break people and all that kind of stuff, because the spirit of the American that was here was sent down to the islands, right? On slave ships. So that part of the story is not untrue. It's just manipulated. And I've seen several incidences of that happening where people were being enslaved. And a guy just pointed that out the other day. I was watching his show. I didn't watch it. I just, looked at a couple of minutes of his show. And he was saying that when you watch that thing, 12 Years a Slave, I think is the movie, you'll be aware of one thing. They kidnapped that man who was not a slave. And then they sent him to the South and put him in conditions of slavery. He was a well-educated and all that stuff guy, but in the conditions, there was almost nothing he could do. He had to work with the situation he woke up that morning and found himself in. So I'm saying a lot of people, and he didn't even know which way was up until somebody would talk to him about which way was this and that, and so he can get an orientation about his location. So I want to just say that because a lot of times what we're being educated and told through these histories, and histories is just a narrative of the past. All history is a narrative of the past. That's all it can be, a narrative. Whether it's correct, incorrect, don't really matter. It's a narrative of the past. It is not the past. I know I hear a lot of people say, oh, you trying to ignore our history or get rid of our history. If it's our history, then, and if it's our narrative, then it's our story, not our history. It's our story. But if you're going to give me a narrative, then it should be our narrative and therefore our story. So that's all I deal with. Now, if somebody like a Chinese guy tell me about the past, the way he got it from his people, then I would say that's his story. That's his story all the way down to where as far as he could tell me about history. His story, that's what he's telling me. And that's what anybody is telling, his story. So history is not the past, it's a story about the past. I want to make that perfectly clear. And another thing I should confess too, this is not the guy I thought it was. This is Aya V. And I know Aya V did the first. I was like, damn, this can't be the guy. I'm thinking about Aya, the elder that I know. But I do know this elder, Aya V. So I was like, wow. Yeah, because he's down there by Savannah Lamar. But the thing I was looking at is that I wanted to say that because there are certain things this elder and I have never spoken about, and this is one of the things. Now he'll go on to say something else, which is why I stopped the thing. I want to get to that part first. I'll give you the next part in a second.
We never come here as Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, or anything. We came here as enslaved African people. So we now need, our generation now need to look at how do we put those differences aside, come together as a people and stand up to what I know is ours and what is right.
Well said, Ross Ivy. No, thank you very much. I was going to ask you if you wanted to, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that you wanted to say or any messaging that you wanted to get out to the audience here before we
Well, I just want to refer to Marcus Garvey. He said a people without a knowledge of their past history and culture is like a tree without root. It's funny enough now that when I was going to school, we were taught history. Now, in school, history is not a must anymore. And I am saying that history should be a must. You will never, ever know where you belong unless you know where you're coming from. You'll never know your destiny unless you know your history. So
that's what I was saying. That you can know your destiny and all of them kind of things starting right now, because just like anyone else, you wake up in the morning and you have amnesia, you don't know nothing, you don't remember nothing. You can still move forward. You look at your circumstances, see where you are, and maneuver from there. All that past stuff and histories and stuff, I think that's a weight. Personally, I think it's a weight on the people. And I think half of the stuff how do you say, not true. And so that weight is first, we carrying a weight that's not ours. It's somebody else's narration of a story, and then half of it or more are not even true, and then they mix it up so that it's a mess. So that and then we traveling and carrying all that weight, and every time we refer to what we want to do next, we refer back to our history, which the story we have been told. And then we function from that point of view instead of functioning from the point of view of the moment that we're in. We function from the point of view of the time that's kind of imaginary in our head about some history we learned from somewhere. And it must automatically be imaginated because you didn't live it. Right. So you didn't experience it. Somebody told you about it. Even if your parents told you about it, that's the story they told you. And then they call that, when your parents tell you, you call that our story. And that's all I'm saying. I don't get this. So now we're claiming that we're going to pivot, because wherever your zero is, like the people say, oh, what's today's date? Today's date is 20. Go ahead with that. Watch, today's date is 20, what is it? 2026. But that's because they have put a zero somewhere. They call it CD, AB, AD. And they'll put that's a zero, because there were other calendars before, and other calendars that still exist right now today that don't have that as their zero, their starting point. So any place can be your starting point. Like people say, people sometimes say, well, tomorrow or when I get a job, I'm gonna do this, or next week I'm gonna do that, or something like that. And I'm saying to you, that's a zero being set. When this happens, then I can start doing, because that's a zero, a vector point. So I'm just saying, we just inclined to agree with other people's vector points when we can establish our own vector points. We don't need to wait for nothing. We don't need to study nothing. All we have to do is, from the moment we decide in our mind what we're going to do, that we just throw down and get it done. So I appreciate, like I said, you know what I mean, anybody checking it out, seeing what I'm talking about here and stuff. I appreciate you checking it out. Please realize, though, that you don't need to know where you come from to know where you're going. You make that decision at the moment. You make that decision at the moment that you are in. Don't wait or try to, I got to study and see what happened. No, that'll confine you. Things have changed. Okay, so let's say in 18, it don't even matter what date you pick from the past. And it doesn't matter. Just pick any old date. You can pick yesterday. The things that happened yesterday ain't going to be able to occur today, because yesterday it was raining, or this morning it was raining, or something like that. Things will change. They're constantly changing. If you attempt to live by what you conceive as, this is an example. Yeah, that's an example, but you can't go by that. That's what keeps people in the same habits, habitual situation that they find themselves, or we find ourselves in all the time, because we're just thinking from a vector point that's going to send all them habits on you. So I'm saying, you decide now. All this stuff about your history and your past, and I have a saying, where one comes from is not nearly as important as where one is going. That's the bottom line with the whole thing. We can look at this stuff, we hear about it, and then we determine what we're going to do and how we're going to affect the world in our lives. I want everybody to do that. Everyone from a 3-year-old to a 30-year-old to whatever. It don't matter how many days you've been here on the planet. Whatever you do, increase yourself and then bring yourself up higher. So I appreciate the fact fact that I was able to bring this thing on because the elder was talking about some stuff. And like I said, I think that's a good idea. We'll see. I'll talk with you later, and determine what you're going to do. Determine your destiny. It can't go by what happened in a supposed past, because it's a supposed past. And then they okay, all your life, like all my life, let me finish this part. All my life, I thought I was in a situation of the underdog too. Not all my life, but you know, I felt that way in times. So I understand what it feels like. And I'm saying to you that you have to take that feeling and redirect it, put it in your storage bin and redirect it, because after that, you can realize that all of this is just a challenge for you, a rite of passage, whatever it is. And then once you pass that and you face it and you go through it, because of your determination, you'll reach another level. But you have to push through some stuff. Everything is not going to be what y'all call easy. For me, it's easy because, right, once you realize, though, that you've been blessed eternally, you have to realize that. No, I could tell you, but you have to realize it. You have been blessed eternally. We all have been blessed eternally. I know people get in the word, oh, we got to stop using the word blessed. Or take it for whatever you want to take it for, whatever it means to you to be blessed. We have been blessed eternally. It's not something that just happened. Oh, he blessed with this, he's blessed with that. No, we're blessed eternally. When I realized I was blessed eternally, I was able to look in my past and see through my story where I had difficulties in my story that I was looking at as though it was something that was innate or something that was unavoidable, but it was always avoidable. And now I've realized that I have been blessed eternally, but we have to be able to go past the restrictions that we put on ourselves from the history. The history has told us certain things, so we think we're restricted in certain ways. I was talking to a guy, and I was telling him how, when I got out of the military, they were doing Desert Storm, I think 84, 82, whatever year it was. And I told the guy, whatever his name, the sergeant, they're going to say, go get your weapons and stuff. And I told them, whoever gives me a weapon and tell me to kill somebody, I don't even got no problem with it, nothing like that. I'm killing the dude that gives me the weapon. So they just said, look, we're going to kick you out of the military. What can I say? I'm not going to go and kill nobody from getting a weapon that somebody giving me the weapon is really the one that's oppressing me. I'm going to kill that one. And I told them, I told them, so if they give me the weapon and I do it, then, la-di-da, he committed suicide. I didn't, it's not my fault. He committed suicide. So the thing I'm saying is, you have to be strong enough to accept the consequences of your own decisions in your own life, not to say somebody forced me to do this or they treat me this way and stuff. You if you stand for being treated, then you will be treated. But if you say, look, I'm not doing this with you, man, then that's, now we're talking two people or whatever number of people. But that's why I say we should collectivize. That's what the whole thing is, collectivize. Get rid of all the differences, focus on the whatever the thing is that's opposite the differences, focus on those things and then work on those things. If I don't like your religion, then let's not talk about religion. Let's talk about what you like farming, let's do the farming. I ain't got no problem with whatever it is, let's do the thing. We don't have to focus on the differences. We are able to focus on the affirmatives and the things that bind us. And the local thing with that is always starting with the truth. People not gonna mess with you too much, man, if you ain't speaking truth. Whatever it is, speak truth. No, whatever it is, you got to have a constitution that people can say, yeah, yeah, I've watched him enough. He gonna speak the truth. Even if it's detrimental to him to speak the truth, he's gonna do it because that's how much input you got. It. That's a constitution. That's a person you can count on. I speak that I speak that to the children and everybody that this speak truth. It's a hell of a thing. That's what credit is all about. Your credit score is low is because you told somebody, you promised somebody that you'll be doing something that you're not doing. It's just that simple. They're not tricking you. You're tricking yourself. You know, like people say, oh yeah, well, you know, he's a pimp and stuff. Yeah, well now the girls are prostituting themselves at the doggone strip clubs. Ain't no dude, I don't think so. Pimping them out of the don't make sense. So they got rid of the middleman. So people are like, oh, that's a shame. You're treating them. Listen. So the idea of the whole thing is determine what you want to do at this moment, any moment, every moment, and carry that out. That's all this life is. Determine what you want to do at this moment, any moment, carry it out. One love. I'm out. I didn't mean to spend all day here. I didn't. Oh, who is that? Oh, somebody just put their name up. I don't know what it says. Oh, Max V. Salute to the host in the chat. I'm glad I caught that. Oh, I appreciate you, man. I put the what's this thing called? You know, the StreamYard thing. If you want to say something, you're welcome to utilize it. And I'm gonna play this little tune because I had this. I went to a situation, and that was my first time in the area, and it was a thing that people have like a festival. It was a Rastafarian joint. And when I got there, I was amazed because I heard this little tune. I like it, and I want to play it for a minute. If somebody wants to go ahead and close out with this. This is called What is Rasta? I think you should pay attention. Yeah. All right. So good night. I appreciate you. One love.